Every year, hundreds of thousands of people cross borders illegally. Are they doing anything wrong? You've got questions, I've got answers. Let's jump into it, but remember first to like, subscribe, or even share. It should come as no surprise, given the prevalence of debates about immigration in the media, that it forms a large part of contemporary political philosophy. The big ethical debate on migration focuses on a very particular question, and that is whether the state has the right to control its borders. Now, if we're going to reduce it down to simplicity, which I'm going to do, it's a YouTube video, there are two positions, open borders and closed borders. Let's look at the reasons. Perhaps the most famous argument for open borders comes from Joseph Cairns. He argues that where you're born is essentially random, right? It is something that we would not allow to affect a person's life opportunities in other circumstances, right? Like, we don't let someone's skin color or eye color or gender affect how they ought to live their lives. It shouldn't affect their chances. Why? Well, they haven't chosen it, right? People should not be held responsible for things that they don't choose. And since no one chooses where they're born, saying that my life is infinitely better because I happen to be born in Canada or because you might be born in the United States or Germany is unfair. In fact, Cairns goes so far as to compare it to being born into feudal nobility. You could have been born a duke in medieval England, and, you haven't earned it. You get a lot of privileges from being a duke, but none of them are the result of anything you have done. So it seems quite unfair that some people are born as serfs and other people are born as dukes, despite the fact that they have done nothing to be in those social positions. As a result, borders should be open, because we should let people seek their lives wherever they want them. It is important not to caricature what Cairns is saying. He thinks that the state may have course to close borders in certain emergencies. What he is arguing is that the presumption, especially in a world where there is some inequality, should be for open borders. On the other side of the coin, you've got people like David Miller, who defends the right of the state to control borders because it protects the national community. He thinks that nations are communities that have moral worth generated by shared identity, and the members of this group have the right to control who enters into membership, and they have the right to protect valuable social institutions like democracy or the rule of law or the welfare state, and that necessarily requires them to control borders. This is complemented by another argument from Michael Blake, which I find actually quite compelling because it focuses on power, which, as you probably know, is a big deal for me. He argues that the state has the right to control its borders because no one has the right to unilaterally impose duties on other people. So a migrant can't simply show up and say, "Hi, I'm here, now you owe me all of the requirements of justice." That would be like someone knocking on your door and saying, "Hi, I'm going to be sleeping on your couch, and it doesn't matter whether you want me in or not." That is simply not permissible. These debates are really interesting, don't get me wrong. Part of you might be like, oh, well, does the state have the right to control its borders? Well, of course it does. That's entirely part of what sovereignty is all about. And you're not wrong, but we need to be careful, right? We need to be careful not to conflate the is with the ought. That is a classical fallacy of thinking. Just because the state has the right to control its borders now does not mean that it ought to have that right to control its borders. But, I'm going to be honest, this is not a debate that I'm particularly interested in. This sort of open borders debate between Cairns and Miller and Blake, it works in an area that I don't work in. Right? It is about, let's say we live in a reasonably just society or a just planet. What would our migration policies look like under these circumstances? It's a question worth asking, but I'm interested in how we should look at the ethics of migration in circumstances of severe injustice. And if you've watched the previous videos, and if you've read the book, you know that I think the world is severely unjust and that people have the right to resist injustice. So could perhaps illegal migration be framed as a type of resistance? Okay, some of you might be a little alarmed or disappointed that I use the term illegal immigrant and illegal immigration. This certainly is a phrase that is very much associated with the Breitbarty, Fox Newsy part of the media space, people who use it as a cudgel to beat up on some pretty vulnerable people. You might prefer that I say something like undocumented migrant or irregular migrant in order to describe this particular test case. I'm not going to do it. I do not equate illegality with immorality. I think that it is a really dangerous thing to do because it gets really close to conflating is with ought. Just because someone is breaking a law doesn't mean they're doing something wrong. There have been a lot of really bad laws in human history, laws that ought to be broken. By avoiding debates around illegality, we basically concede the field without firing a shot. I am unwilling to do that. I am not willing to say that these people are doing something wrong or hiding the fact that they're doing something illegal. The two do not run together. So are illegal immigrants who are migrating to escape from poverty. So I'm not talking about people who go through regular channels. I'm not talking about refugees who can arrive by any means that they need to. I'm talking about people who are looking for a better life, fleeing extreme poverty. Are they doing something wrong? Well, let's look at it through an analogy. I know, I rely a lot on analogy, but it helps, and the analogy, it's played out. I know, it's slavery. I refer to slavery. Why am I doing it? Well, if you've watched the previous videos, you know that I think that there are structural similarities between the causes of global poverty and inequality and the structural institution of slavery. Because they are so similar, the ways in which one was resisted might apply in the case of the latter. So I like looking at how slaves resisted slavery as a way of looking at how people might resist extreme poverty. One of the ways in which slaves resisted was by running away. Now, this might not capture your idea of what political resistance looks like. I mean, certainly there were a lot of overtly political attempts to overturn slavery. We have a very long history of slave rebellions in the course of human affairs. They don't end well. A lot of slaves didn't think that they could overturn slavery through force of arms. Instead, they opted to try to escape. And if you remember back when I discussed what resistance was, you can have justice-seeking forms of resistance, but you can also have injustice-evading forms of resistance. And this is a case of injustice evading. These were people trying to escape the sight of injustice. And they did so in fairly large numbers, and at no small risk, of course. If someone was caught absconding from slavery, it was likely that they would be, at the very least, beaten. They might even be murdered, as an example to other slaves. They might be sold down the river to work in extreme conditions in the worst slave plantations in the Deep South. It was a risky proposition, but a lot of people simply found slavery intolerable. And if you want an amazing account of this, read Frederick Douglass's autobiography, My Bondage, My Freedom, in which he describes what it's like to be a slave and how he escaped and what freedom felt like. It will move you. It makes you appreciate what life is like under injustice. And the same can be said for illegal economic migrants. They can't overturn the global economic system. They don't have the voice. They don't live in powerful states like America or the United Kingdom or Germany or China. By and large, there are still some extremely poor people in China. They don't have even effective government at home. Often they live in corrupt states, which are corrupted by the nature of the international system. They don't go to Davos. They don't have any pull at the World Trade Organization or the World Bank. They are without any power in the international system. Now, I'm going to talk in a future episode about violent resistance and revolution, but we might say that this is an extreme, intransigent system of domination, and people living in severe poverty, they might just try to escape from the sight of extreme injustice, and that would take the form of illegal economic migration. And this isn't without risks, obviously. Lots of people die crossing from Africa to Europe in the small boats. A lot of people die of exposure and thirst crossing the border between Mexico and the United States. Once they cross the borders, they might wind up getting caught by authorities and put into an ICE camp. They might be split up from their families. They might be repatriated. If they come to the United Kingdom, they might be sent to Rwanda. This is not a small risk, but people are willing to escape injustice. The point that I'm making is that if you think slaves were justified in running away from the sight of slavery, then you must also think that the people living in extreme poverty are entitled to illegally, economically immigrate if they want to. Now, it's not legal, it's breaking the law, but it might be justifiable under circumstances of injustice. I hate to say it, but I'm not perfect, right? I mean, it's shocking. I mean, I know, gasp. Try to control your disappointment. I might be wrong on this. So I'd like to think a little bit about some pretty serious objections that people might have to this position, because I will fully fess up that this is a pretty radical opinion on what people do crossing borders illegally. Most people probably disagree with me. So why might they disagree with you? What are strong reasons? Well, there's a descriptive objection, I guess. People might say, well, people who are crossing borders illegally aren't thinking of themselves as resisting injustice. They're, coming to take our jobs or something. This actually isn't true. People are acutely aware in the global south about inequality and about poverty. They're not fools. They're not simps. They have mobile phones. They have social media. And yes, you can be poor and have social media. You can be extremely poor and have a mobile phone. This is technology that is widely available. You can have a mobile phone, but you might not have enough to eat. This is a tool that people have. And I know it sort of blows people's minds. It's sort of a boomery thing where they're just like, how can they be extremely poor if they have a mobile phone? It's like, well, because phones aren't that expensive, Mildred. Think about all the phones that get thrown away. I got phones coming out the yang here, right? People have mobile phones. Get over it. I'm sorry, that was a very weird little sidetrack. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these people are aware of global inequality. They're aware of extreme poverty. And they do not think it is just. They want their fair share of the pie of the global economy. And they're not getting it right now. I mean, we might go back and look at David Miller's argument, right? I alluded to it earlier in the video. He says that nations have the right to control who is admitted and who isn't into their sort of particular communities in order to protect valuable social institutions, protect democracy, protect the rule of law, protect the welfare state, protect all the things that we value for sort of objective universal reasons, because Miller is, of course, a liberal nationalist. This argument does have some weight. If we were dealing with circumstances where hundreds of millions of people were on the move, he might have a point. But of course, this mass migration of people is a delusion that has affected the far right for a long time. If you read Jean Raspail's The Camp of the Saints from the 1970s, it is an odious, racist novel about millions of people overrunning Europe, and it's super racist, and it is not really well written either. This is not the case. It takes a lot for people to actually leave their homes. And I say this as someone who is an immigrant, right? I was born in Canada. I live in the United Kingdom. I up sticks and I moved. And that was an easy move, right? This is not moving between the global south and the global north. It's not learning a new language. It's just getting on a plane, going over the pond, going from the Queen of Canada's domain to the Queen of England's domain. No, the Queen of Britain. Oh, they're going to take away my British citizenship. Don't tell them I said that. So people are not going to be moving en masse. And even if they were moving in fairly great numbers, the numbers that they move at today, would this cause social collapse? I am skeptical of these claims. The state that we have right now is pretty resilient. It can do a lot. We saw this during COVID. Now, we might not want to do as much as we do if you're a libertarian, but I don't know that people immigrating illegally are going to cause social collapse. It seems to me to be over-egging the pudding. And think about the view of history, right? Whenever I think about these ethical problems, I try to think about what my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren will think of the things that we're doing right now, sort of how we think about slavery. Now, if the policy of the free states and of British North America in the 19th century in relation to fugitive slaves from the American South was to send them back into slavery because they were worried about social dislocation, I don't think we would judge them particularly well. The question I ask myself is, are we doing just that with illegal economic migrants right now? And I think it's pretty close. But, you say, Dr. Blunt, what about that argument Michael Blake makes? This is something that you're quite sympathetic to. And he says, no one can impose unilaterally duties on other people. And look, I'm a Republican. I hate arbitrary power. I don't think someone can just knock on your door, walk in, and sleep on your couch for the rest of their lives without your consent. That is something that I am virulently opposed to. So does that defeat the argument that I've made in this video? No, it doesn't. And that's because Blake's argument is premised on no previous connection, right? There is no connection between the migrant in his case and the person at the border deciding whether they get let in or not. But we have a relationship with people living in severe poverty, people who are experiencing profound inequality. This is the product, at least in part, of our global economic system that in the North we benefit from and we actively shape. We cannot pretend that these people are strangers. We cannot pretend that we do not have a relationship with them. It's sort of like if you expand your house greatly to the point that it causes structural instability in your neighbor's home, and then it falls down, and then they come over and say, I think you need to take me in for a little while as compensation for wrecking my house. That's the relationship that we have with people living in severe poverty. So I don't think Blake's argument particularly tells in the instance of economic migration as a form of resistance. Now you might say, Dr. Blunt, I see your point. I know what you're trying to say, but I still don't like illegal immigration because it seems to be doing something wrong, even if these people are living in extreme poverty, even if this poverty is produced by global social institutions. They're crossing borders, they're engaging in crime, they're working with some pretty horrible people to get across borders, human traffickers. It makes me feel a bit icky. And I get it. I really do. It puts me in mind of what Tommy Shelby wrote in his book Dark Ghettos, where he wrote about dissent. He writes about what we want out of people who are engaged in dissent against injustice. And he gives the example of Rosa Parks. Everyone wants their heroes to be like Rosa Parks because she was poised, she was calm, she was principled, she was nonviolent. She decided to sit in the sort of whites-only section of the bus and refused to move. And that was a very noble moment. We don't want our dissidents to be like, he gives the example of NWA. I'm not going to say their full name. When they wrote the song Fuck the Police, right? Fuck the police. People don't like this don't like this statement. They didn't like it back when NWA wrote the song. They still don't like it now. But they were writing about a very important issue, which is how black communities in the States are policed. And the level of police brutality, the lack of impartiality, the lack of due process. They might not like the swearing, but the message is pretty relevant. I look at illegal immigration as a form of impure resistance. It has a lot wrong with it, but ultimately it's justifiable given the wrong that it is confronting. Okay, I know that was a lot to cram into a short YouTube video, but if you want to know more, you can always pick up the book. Or you can put some questions down in that question zone on YouTube, because I'm around. I'll answer questions. You want to talk to me about the ethics of migration? Do it. I'm here. And remember to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching. Take care, everyone.